Good evening. Welcome to this edition of the Evening Review. My name is Jemima Beatrice. I'm your host this evening. Tonight we have in studio Saddam Amushelelo. He is the co-founder of the Black People Economic Emancipation Association. He's talking to us about the challenges that young Black people are facing and the solutions they would propose as an association. Thank you for joining us, Saddam.
It's a pleasure to be here, Jemima.
So let's talk about the Black People Economic Emancipation Association. When was it founded and what is it about?
Okay, so we founded the Black People's Economic Emancipation in 2021. Now, the whole idea behind the association is basically to advocate for economic emancipation, especially amongst Black people. Now, obviously, over the last 34 years, we've gained obviously independence. We've got freedom of movement, freedom of association, and all of these things. But unfortunately, we still haven't gotten economic freedom. Now, it is not correct that we as Blacks are the majority in this country, but in terms of ownership of the economy, in terms of ownership of the land, it doesn't reflect our numbers. And that for me is something that is absolutely wrong. Obviously, something needs to be done because the minority can never be able to control the majority. Unfortunately, things are just skewed, and that is why we formed this association in order for us to be able to advocate for Black people to start basically building their own economies, to start taking ownership of the economy, and obviously for just certain injustices to be redone and basically rewritten, and then just for certain wrongs to be done right.
Yeah. Now, when you presented your case to the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Economics, one of the things you said was that Namibia, the liberation fighters have traded the trenches for air-conditioned offices. You also said the Namibians have moved from a white master to Black masters. Can you elaborate on these thoughts?
Okay, well, here's the thing. For the 34 years, we have told people the notion that Namibia gained its independence through war. But that's an absolute lie, because through war, what usually happens is that the winner takes it all. But through negotiations, there are certain compromises. Now, at the negotiating table before 1990, there were three things at the table. It was the land, it was political freedom, and it was the economy. So one of them had to be chosen. And then unfortunately, our leaders chose political freedom. That's why today we no longer call Verwoerd and Botha them His Excellency. We now have replaced them with our Black masters, who we now call Your Worship, Your Honor, His Excellency, and all of that. So basically, these people did not ensure that we became totally liberated. That is why up until today, 70% of our land is still in the hands of white people. That is why 95% of the economy is still controlled by white people. That's simply because these people who now became our so-called liberators, they traded their trenches and the bushes in order for them to have nice Mercedes. They now live in Ausblik in the State House and all those posh places. But the majority of the people who supported them, they still live in kabashus, they still live in informal settlements, rural areas, and things of that sort. So the independence fruits are only being enjoyed by a few. Mm-hmm. So what literally happened is that we just replaced the white elite with a new Black elite. Now, it is not acceptable that we continue telling our people the same lie. It is not acceptable that each and every single year at independence, we start lying to our people that we fought hard for this country and all of these things. Now, I do not take away the contribution of the people who died for this country when we say that these people literally sold us out. But the only issue is to say that people died. And these people unfortunately died in vain, because at the end of the day, this settlement could have been reached without anyone having died and would have still gained our independence. Mm-hmm. So those people whose blood waters our freedom, they do not water our blood, or their blood do not water our freedom so that we can live in kabashus, so that we can die from hunger, so that we can die from preventable diseases, so that their great-grandchildren are taught under trees, so that when you go to a hospital, you go lie on a mattress or on the floor. That's not what they died for. They died hoping that one day would be able to be prosperous and would be able to enjoy our natural mineral resources. But unfortunately, that is not being done. And that is why we're saying our liberators traded the trenches and the bushes for air-conditioned offices an air-conditioned Mercedes-Benz.
Now, one of the things that you are talking about as a solution is nationalization of many of these public entities.
Yes.
How do you think will it change what you've now said, the black master
Yes.
situation?
No, so here's the thing. Now, this is what we need to understand. In capitalism, it's all about privatization, meaning that as an individual or as a family, we can own a mine that produces gold, or we can own a mine that produces diamonds, and those diamonds, whatever profits we make from there, we do not need to share them with the rest of the nation. Obviously, we'll give now and then some few taxes, some few royalties, but the real money, we get to keep it because it's private. But when we nationalize, that simply means that government would now be able to, let's say, for example, the other day I was reading that Rosing made about 6.8 billion. That money could have gone straight to government coffers, meaning that we now no longer need to go borrow money from the World Bank or from the IMF or from the African Development Bank or from the European Union Bank or whatever. We would have the money in order to be able to take care of our people. Remember, it is shameful that we are one of the richest countries in the world, yet we have some of the highest inequalities in the world. It doesn't make any sense. So once we nationalize some of our key sectors of the economy, which is your natural resources, your banks, insurance companies, and other strategic sectors of the economy, you would now be able to have the wealth in order for you to be able to take care of your people, and you'd have surplus to be able to make sure that no one dies from hunger, no one dies from starvation. Imagine we're currently facing drought. Government is going around the world begging for food. We've got an ocean there. We could literally go to our ocean and say, all the companies, if they were nationalized, would literally say, we need about 100 metric tons of fish, hake, and all these things, feed our people. I mean, we've got Etosha. Why is it that we cannot go there, kill an elephant or two to be able to feed our people? We don't need to beg. The resources are there, but unfortunately, because these resources are owned by private families and private individuals, that is why the rest of the country is languishing in poverty.
Now tell me, how does the Black People Economic Emancipation Association plan to implementation that idea of nationalization to make sure that it benefits everyone and not just the new elite?
So this is what we're fighting for. We're not just fighting for nationalizations of the banks. We're also fighting for nationalization of the land. Now, it is not correct that someone owns 100,000 hectares of land, while there are people who literally are in squatter camps, who are in slums, who are in kabashus. If you go to Walvis Bay, people literally, if one house burns or one shack burns, the other shacks burn because they are literally all in one. So what we're simply saying is that we need an equitable redistribution of the land. So what we're going to do is, and this is our proposal to government, to say that let us take all the productive land, nationalize it, and then we start giving it to people who want to utilize it. Now, there are people who want to do farming, but unfortunately, they cannot do farming because they simply do not have land. There are people who just want a piece of land to call home. They do not have it because, unfortunately, someone owns 200,000 football fields. For those of people who don't understand what a hectare is a soccer field. You are just looking for something small, but there's somebody who has that. So what we're simply saying is to say that once these things are nationalized, they must then be equitably redistributed. We are also saying that part of this farmlands that we're asking for productive land is to say that it is not correct that as a country on a yearly basis when there's a drought, we need to beg for food. Let's utilize some of this productive land to produce food and ensure that our country is a food secured country. Because right now there's a foreigner, Italian or Chinese, who owns 100,000 hectare land, but it's solely for the purpose of what? Leisure. While you've got people dying, there's someone who just has 100,000 hectares for the mere sake of saying, I've got a ranch or I've got a farm where I go there on a weekend, or in fact, when it's cold in Europe, then they most probably say, I'm now going to Namibia to my farm to go get some sunshine. But there are people struggling just for a piece of land to do farming or to do whatever it is that they need. So these are our birthrights. As a Namibian, when we sing the national anthem, Namibia, our motherland. We should be ashamed of singing that anthem because we have no land. We are landless. So in fact, we should be singing Namibia, our motherless, because we've got nothing. Apart from these blue IDs that we have, that's about the only thing that you have as a Namibian. A foreigner in this country is more Namibian than you are because they've got a mining license. They've most probably got a mine. They've got 100,000 hectares of land, and they've got all these other things that they're enjoying. You as a Namibian, what do you have to show that you're a Namibian? That's why I'm saying that we Namibians are foreigners in our own country. And unfortunately, as a Black People's Economic Emancipation Association, we are not going to allow Black people to continue being foreigners in their country of birth.
So EPLs, anyone can apply for an EPL. So why would you not encourage Namibians to apply for EPLs themselves? What are the challenges in your view?
So here's the thing. It's not just about being able to apply for an EPL. You know, and the reason why we're calling for nationalization of all our natural resources is because, number one, yes, let's, for argument's sake, everyone can apply for an EPL and all of that. And at the end of the day, like I've told you, Jemima, from the beginning, if Jemima Bakers goes to the Ministry of Mines, apply for an EPL, whether it's for oil, gold, or diamonds, that simply means that it is only going to be for you, Jemima. The only thing that government gets from your EPL would most probably be taxes or royalties. But if it's owned by government, and let's assume hypothetically you find a gold mine that's worth 100 billion, that simply means it's 100 billion for all Namibians, irrespective of whether they're white, whether they are black or anything of the sort, because it now belongs to the country. That's what nationalization means. Nationalization simply means that it belongs to all the citizens as opposed to privatization, where it only belongs to a private citizen.
So can you please explain to me, how would this be, of course it's slightly different, but there are, for instance, affirmative action that has opened it up to Black people having easy access to jobs that they would previously not have been able to access. So how would your approach be different? And why would it be a success if you compare to affirmative action that has really not truly helped?
So here's the difference. The difference is to say that we're no longer going to look on your proximity to a politician. We're no longer going to look at your proximity to the elite. So what we're simply saying is we're going to level the playing field. So once the state owns something, let's take for an example, why is it that the state owns Nam Power, Nam Water? It's because they understand those are strategic sectors of our economy. I cannot go today and go and say that I'm going to start supplying water to anyone because government regulates that particular field. So what we're simply saying is to say that the state should own and control all strategic sectors of the economy so that when I, Amushelelo, go apply for electricity, if I have the means to get that electricity, then I'll be given that electricity. But what we're simply saying, and what our argument is to say that it cannot be correct that natural resources that should belong to everyone are only benefiting a few individuals. So our argument is not to say whether you are from this political party or you're from that political party, whether you belong to that church or whether you belong to this particular tribe. What we're simply saying is that every single Namibian, it must be your birthright to be able to enjoy the diamonds that we produce, the uranium that we produce, lithium, gold, and whatever resources that we have in this country. It is your birthright by default by being born in Namibia. In fact, if one is born in Namibia, you should consider it a jackpot. It's like having won a lottery because you have been born in a rich country. But now it's like when you're born in Namibia, it's a curse because you're going to be faced with poverty, landlessness, joblessness, homelessness, and all those things. And unfortunately, it's a sad day to be a Namibian, despite the fact that we've got all these riches.
But there are countries, communist countries, for instance, where the same policy would apply, and there's still political elites, for instance. So how would you, as an association, then guard against a new elite being born?
So here's the thing. I think what we need to do is let's learn from countries that have done it perfectly. Now, Singapore is one of those countries. If you go to Singapore, you will not find a single poor person. Singapore has I think a population of about 5.75 million people. If you look at the amount of land that they have, it's not even the size of Etosha. But within that space that they have, everyone has a home, everyone has a secure job, poverty is almost at 0.something percentage. Singapore has no resources for those who do not know, but yet Singapore is one of, I think it's in the top 10 richest countries. So what is it? It's all about leadership. And unfortunately, if we do not have the right type of leadership in our country, whether it's now the citizens or those in power, because it doesn't help you've got people in power, but yet the citizens are not holding those people accountable. Because once we nationalize, then it becomes the priority and responsibility of every citizen to ensure that our resources are not misquandered. We need to now make sure to say, once we fully own De Beers, or when we fully own Horongo Cement or B2 Gold, we must now ensure that the revenues that are produced from our gold go to make sure that our children have schools, we've got public health facilities that are in order, our people have decent houses, electricity most probably even becomes for free, because we would be then having nuclear reactors or nuclear power plants, because you cannot be the second largest producer of uranium, but you still import 60% of your electricity. That just shows you that there is something wrong that we're doing.
Before we follow up on that question and me poking holes into your argument, let's go for a quick break. We'll be right back.
Connection. It's in the human touch, the feeling of belonging. It inspires us and empowers us, creates clarity from complexity. It starts new conversations, unlocks the power of advice, and makes an impact on your life. At Alex Forbes, we pioneer insight to provide you with advice that connects your decisions of today to your impact tomorrow.
Welcome back. Now, my name is Jemima Beatrice, your host this evening. If you've just joined us, we are having in studio Saddam Amushelelo. He is a co-founder of Black People Economic Emancipation Association, and they're talking to us about the plans they have for Namibia under a new dispensation. So before we went on a break, we were talking about the new leadership that is necessary to usher in policies like nationalization to make sure that everyone benefits from the country's resources. Now, you were talking about Singapore as a perfect example, but we also have right next door, we have Zimbabwe, for instance, where everything has fallen flat. So do you believe Namibia has proper systems and institutions in place? We always say we do, but do you think it's strong enough to withhold the kind of pressures that come with a big decision like that?
But I think institutions crumble and fall if citizens are non-compliant and they also do not take accountability and responsibility. You see, the problem is that our education system has been watered down to a level whereby citizens do not hold their leaders accountable. And for as long as, obviously, citizens do not understand that they are the ones who truly hold the power. Remember, when we elect politicians, presidents, ministers, and all of those things, people to parliament, we are simply, and I think it's important that we educate our people. When you vote, you are surrendering the power that you have to this particular party or to this particular individual that you're voting. So you have literally given them your power to say, here, I'm entrusting you with my power to make the correct decisions on my behalf. Now, we as citizens, what do? We sit back, we start going to do whatever it is, and then we forget to say that you must hold this particular individual accountable. And that starts with the citizens. Now, if for as long as citizens do not know how to hold their leaders accountable, then unfortunately things do crumble. Now in Zimbabwe, we have obviously seen that these people do not hold their leaders accountable. Zimbabweans would rather go and migrate to other countries. That's why you see there are so many Zimbabweans in Namibia, there are so many Zimbabweans in South Africa and elsewhere, because they are choosing not to hold their leaders accountable. But if Zimbabweans today stood up in their numbers and said, we are tired of this corruption, we are tired of this that's going on, unfortunately, then things are going to change. But when the citizens themselves do not choose to hold their leaders accountable, things fall apart. You mentioned to say that, do our institutions work? Yes, our institutions perfectly work. I remember in 2016, on June the 16th, when we were still activists, we went and demonstrated against the building of a new parliament. Now, what does that show you? It shows you that when the citizens stand up and hold their leaders accountable. They listen and they correct their actions, because the purpose of having citizens is to make sure that the person who's driving the bus, remember, we are like in a bus. So if the driver hits the car in the bus into a pavement, and we as citizens, we are just happy that the driver is driving the bus into a pavement, what do you think is going to happen? Eventually, it's going to be a head-on collision, or the bus is going to overturn, because we are all comfortable seated. So we must not be comfortable. We must ensure that those at the top, we make their lives a bit uncomfortable. And that is why our constitution makes provision for us to protest peacefully without arms, so that we are able to air our grievances whenever we have issues that we're not happy with.
So one of the issues you're also highlighting as an association that you have, that you would like to do away with, this white monopoly. Can you share with us what specific policies and strategies you have in place to break the control of trade of white monopoly?
I mean, the only way for us to do that, number one, is through education, and number two is through information sharing, and number three is obviously through government will. Now, the reason why we're asking for banks to be nationalized, it is not correct that banks on an annual basis, they make billions of profits, and those profits are siphoned off to their native countries. Because remember, all of these banks are multinationals, meaning that they just have branches here, and the CEOs that sit here, they've got no decision-making power or anything of the sort. And literally all of our profits, they are sent back to wherever that certain particular bank comes from. So why is it that this is money that comes from hardworking Namibians that needs to be siphoned all the way to South Africa or to Nedbank or to England or to wherever? So that's why we're saying that we need to nationalize our banks. I mean, banking is not something complex. We currently have a few state-owned banks. So why is it that we're not just nationalizing the whole sector? I mean, if you look at how the banking system currently works, it's been set up in such a way that you, as an ordinary black child, if you go to the bank and you're seeking for assistance, you would not be able to assist it. But a fellow white counterpart, having the same circumstances you are, they are likely to be assisted because obviously the banks are owned by their community. And we must not shy away from telling the truth. If you look at the level of sponsorship that banks give to cycling, which is white sports, cricket, rugby, and all of these things, they sponsor millions. But if you look at what these guys sponsor into our black sports, like football as an example, why is it that FNB can't build a stadium like they've built in South Africa? Why is it that Nedbank or Standard Bank can't build our soccer stadiums? But if you look what they do on the other side, they sponsor massively. So I think that is why we need to nationalize some of these key sectors, so that we're able to ensure that the profits that are made using money from our people are channeled back into the communities and not just certain communities. I mean, it pains me when I go to a white-owned school. You would find literally these white monopoly companies scrambling to have their names on boards. But go to a school in Katutura, you would literally find no sponsor. The school is dilapidated, is falling apart. But at the same time, if you look at the amount of money that is being collected, it's predominantly coming from the black community into the white hands. But this money never comes back, because these people understand that you first need to take care of your people before you're able to take care of anyone else.
Now, tell me, Amushelelo, you were talking about educating Namibians. Now, how are you going to help Namibians, or how can they participate in discussions and decision-making when it comes to this policy of nationalization that you would like to push forward?
I think what needs to be done as an association, we're obviously representing black people. Now, we're not saying that white people, that all white people are well off. We know for a fact that there are white people who've got no land. We've got white people who do not own strategic sectors of the economy. And we fully understand to say that you get the Arambur and you get the poor black person and all of that. So that's why we're pushing for nationalization, because nationalization simply means that every single Namibian is going to benefit as a result of nationalization. So in terms of education and discourse, obviously through media platforms such as yours, we are now bringing to the fore that we need to nationalize the land. The land needs to belong to everyone, because if I take any politician, if I take any business person and I say, please create land for me, No one would be able to create land for you because that's something that comes natural. Now, if I say any business person currently in mining and I say, please produce gold for me, they won't be able to produce gold for you, meaning that that is a natural resource that is eventually going to be depleted. However, we must ensure before all these natural resources are depleted, they benefit each and every single Namibian. It is not correct that you guys have reported in the media that 1,700 Namibians share amongst themselves 400 billion. Does that even sound correct? Where you have in a country, you've got over 1.6 million people living in poverty, but 1,700 people, each one of them have 400 billion Namibian dollars. I've done the maths. If you divide that 400 billion into a population of about 3 million, each one is still able to comfortably have about 1 point something million or 2 point something million. So why is it that only a handful of people own all the wealth? And this handful of people own all this wealth because all the strategic sectors of the economy are in the private hands. Now, for a very long time, we have pushed the notion to say that if things are in the hands of the private sector, jobs are created and things of that sort. Now, why, if that's the argument, that we have almost over 1.2, 1.4 million people who are unemployed? Right now, most of the economy is in private sector. But this private sector is failing our people. And I want to make another example of China. China was able to lift 600 million people out of poverty. And for those people who don't know, China has a population of about 1.3 billion people. Now, here in Namibia, we are less than 3 million, or we are 3 million now at most. But still, we have half of the population sitting in poverty. That, for me, is a serious crisis. And that is why we're saying we need to push for nationalization, because it is not correct that Amushelelo owns a mine or Jemima owns a mine, but that mine only benefits Jemima and Jemima's family. Those are resources that belong to all Namibians, and they should start benefiting every single Namibian. It is not correct that if you go to Walvis Bay, one of the richest towns in our country, people are scavenging from dustbins while they've got a blue ocean that is literally next to them. And please, the ocean is not just for fish. The ocean is also for transportation. If you ask how many amount of containers we're now handling from Botswana, Zambia, Zimbabwe, DRC, that is money that is being made on a daily basis. But who benefits from this? It's only a few again. And that is why we're saying, let us nationalize all the key sectors, starting with the land, starting with the mines, the banks, and all the monopoly sectors, so that everyone starts benefiting as a Namibian, irrespective of whether you're black or anything of that sort. The only reason why we've started this association is because the blacks are in the majority and they are the ones who are still advantaged. There are those white people who are, we call them still advantaged, because from the days of apartheid, from the days of colonialism, they've benefited. So there are those who have not benefited at all. So all we're saying is to say that there must be equitable redistribution of wealth. And then once you start, then let's say, for example, if we've got B2 Gold that produces 33 billion on an annual basis, and each Namibian now starts benefiting from that, what you do with your money, that's then entirely up to you, or what you do with that benefit. Because there are obviously some who are going to build on that wealth, and there are some who are going to squander it. And it's almost like the biblical story of where people were given talents. This one said, me, I'm putting mine in the pocket. And unfortunately, life is always going to be that way. There are those who are going to have no talents, but they're still going to succeed. There are those who are going to give them all the talents, and they're still not going to succeed. But what we're saying is, in a country as rich as Namibia, no Namibian should be landless, no Namibian should be homeless, no Namibian should struggle to send their child to school because there's not enough spaces in school, or they can't afford to do that. No Namibian should struggle with healthcare and all these other basic things. All we're saying is, let's level the playing field for the basic needs. And then if somebody wants a double story, that's up to them. But at least someone must have a decent home with a toilet, with a shower. There must be hot water. There must be electricity. Let's get the basics right. And then if somebody wants to expand it now to a mansion, that's entirely up to them.
Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for joining us. Goodbye.
It's a pleasure.